Ambassador Surya, thank you very much for joining us. We know that Singapore has entered what is known as the phase 3 of the reopening of the country. That means the easing of many of the public health safety measures. So what is life like now for people on the street these days? But I noticed that you're still wearing a mask, so I'm sure that
Yes.
the mask wearing is still a must, right?
Yes, it is. Anyway, hello and nice to talk to you here from Singapore. We are in what is known as the phase 3 of the plan in Singapore to fight against the COVID pandemic. Now, what does phase 3 mean? Essentially, it's increased in the easing of various measures. I'll give you an example. For example, meals, whether it's lunches or dinners that are hosted in homes. Before, you could only have 5 people at the dinner table. Now you can have 8 people. Now, it doesn't sound a lot, but for many families, it's a big improvement. All right. In the shopping malls, previously the capacity is only 50%. You only allow 50% capacity of people coming in, but now you increase it to 65%. All right. So there are easing of measures to allow more everyday life to proceed. But in exchange, the measures to protect oneself, whether, as I showed you, the wearing of the mask, safe distancing, the use of an application, which in Singapore's case is what is called Trace Together, to track where you are or who your contacts have been. All these are in place, and they are, to be frank, strictly enforced for the safety, public safety of the people in Singapore. So this is where we are right now. We can live everyday life, we can go shopping, but with safeguards, with measures, and everyone exercises self-discipline to assist all these efforts.
And we understand that the failure to comply with these measures carries legal penalties too, right?
Yes. There's different grades of violation, but if there is an initial violation, usually there is a warning. And there is a very interesting concept here in Singapore, what we call safe distancing ambassadors, who are people recruited and trained to help manage the flow of people, make sure that people have 1 meter distance from one another in the public places. But if these are not complied, then there are penalties, including fines. And in some cases, if there are more severe violations of the guidelines, there are, various offenses can be punished for foreigners, for example, can be asked to leave the country, deportation. Yeah. These have happened in the past during the circuit breaker period, and these legal measures continue. But essentially, it's part of the overall effort to ensure that people comply with these safeguard measures in exchange for the easing of measures so that people can live as much of an everyday life as possible, but under new normal situation.
Ambassador, Singapore faced rising number of infection among migrant workers before. So what the experience from Singapore that you can share with us in terms of measure helping migrant workers?
Yes, that's a very important question. Let me just say, first of all, that the situation here in Singapore is, of course, unique. You have a country, a small country, and with, I think, the third most densely populated country in the world. There's a very high number of foreign workers here. I think in the what we call the foreign workers dormitories, there are 43 of them, various sites. There's a total of about 323,000 migrant workers there. So you have a unique situation in Singapore. So some of the measures that have been used, we will have to see whether they can be applied or not to other countries. It's up to each country, of course. But let me share what measures have been undertaken. For example, when the cases start to really increase, I would say either geometrically or exponentially in around April, we had cases. I think the peak was around 1,200 infections a day for a short time. What happened? First of all, the circuit breaker, what they call the circuit breaker, what other countries call the lockdown, was in effect throughout the entire country. So you had the entire country in a circuit breaker period, I think for about 7 weeks, which means you really cannot come out of your house unless it's for very, with very targeted and specific reasons. Okay, and then in the what we call the foreign workers dormitories, they were the term that was used was gazetted, which means no one in, no one out. But medical facilities and other amenities were provided in these foreign workers dormitories in order to allow the foreign workers or the migrant workers to continue with their daily lives, but within those dormitories. Work stopped. So there was no, the work sites, whether it is in construction, other things, was put on hold. And the foreign workers were essentially confined to the dormitories for about close to 3 months. We are now in a situation where the testing has shown that the number of cases have gone down very dramatically. Since October, if I remember correctly, the cases are no more than 20. Sometimes even less than 10 per day. And so right now you have a situation where the migrant workers now allowed, for those who have cleared to leave the dormitories, they're allowed to be escorted to their work sites. But then after they finish work, they are escorted back to their dormitories, all right? So it's a very controlled movement of foreign workers. So this is the situation we're in right now here in Singapore. These are the measures that have taken place.
There are tens of thousands of Thai workers in Singapore right now, as we all know. But how have they been living through this very difficult time?
Yes, that is one of the top priorities of the Royal Embassy and Team Thailand here in Singapore is to take care of the interests of the Thai community here in Singapore, and including our Thai workers in the various dormitories. It was very difficult in terms of adjusting at the very beginning, I think around March, April, May, June, because they were confined in certain areas, and so it was tough for them. But thanks to the support of both the Singaporean government and the Thai community here in Singapore, different associations helped helping hand. They donated Thai food, all right, but it has to be dry food. It cannot be prepared food. And then the embassy's role was to ask permission, to secure the permission for these supplies to enter the dormitories, for example. This is to help the Thai workers. For Thai workers who had a language communication problem, we had a team of Thai students and Thai professors who are based here in Singapore to help translate documents that are regulations in the dormitory. So they would send a photograph on WhatsApp or line to our team, and then we would translate the documents back to them. For Thai workers who had medical problems and they had difficult communicating, we had Thai doctors who acted as interpreters working with the Singaporean health authorities to ensure that the Thai workers are well cared for and that their symptoms could be addressed, right? So these are the things that they have done. Right now, the Thai workers, as far as we know, some of them are now allowed to work in the work sites because they have now been cleared to do so. However, for those Thai workers who want to leave Singapore to go to Thailand, the embassy provides the facilities in order to assist Thai workers to go back. These are what we call the repatriation flights that we have arranged. I think we have arranged about 5,200 Thai people, including workers, to go back since the COVID pandemic started here in Singapore. So this is the situation, Thai workers. We continue to monitor and we continue to assist whenever we can.